Alright, so this year for my senior thesis project, I did an art book consisting of poetry and photography. So for my thesis, it reads, as the attempted coup of July 16, 2016 was triggered by religious tensions within the Turkish government. Friction between Islam and secularism, as embodied in the policies of Mustafa Kemal, later called Ataturk, are at the root of most of the modern conflicts within Turkey. These tensions can be traced back to the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire and the birth of the modern Turkish Republic in the years after World War I. An examination of the recently failed coup will demonstrate a trend toward increased religious sentiment within Turkey from the time of the rise of Ataturk's Turkish Republic. So this was my thesis statement for my paper, and basically what this is about is me just tracing the root of the conflict within Turkey and focusing mainly on the religion aspect of that. And the first half of the year, that's really what I worked on, was my paper. And so within my paper, I included my interview with Risat Kassab, and he's the director of the Jackson School of International Studies at University of Washington. And he's written multiple books on Turkey. He's actually from the southern border of Turkey, so I just wanted to include that. Even though this is not incorporated within my actual project, I did do the interview, and that's in my paper. So I wanted to mention that. And so I would like to read to you the introduction for my art book, and this sort of explains how Turkey relates to an art book. So just like my paper was about the overarching idea about the one voice trying to suppress another, this book explores the concept abstracted through photography and poetry. In the Turkish coups, one group takes control and attempts to silence the ideas and opinions of others. Rather than exploring a prime example of suppression and control, I wanted to conceptually understand it and where else it could be found. The purposes of the poetry next to the photographs is to guide the thought and to add direction to the photo narrative, and I found this necessary even if it just guided thought toward the idea I was getting at. The purpose of this book is to inspire thought about this concept of control, and for this reason there will be no more explanation of the series, poems, or layouts answered within this book. When viewing, keep in mind that this was meant for thought expansion, not explanation of a phenomena I know little to nothing about. So that was just the foreword within my art book, and that sort of helps to connect those two ideas. And this is the title and then what I just read to you. And then the art book itself includes that introduction, title page, 35 photos sorted into 12 series, 3 photos, one series is 2 photos, but 3 photos within each series, 12 poems that I wrote myself, and it all kind of came together in this 26-page book. It's laid out like this, and I gave this sort of screenshot version of this to you in order to sort of show what it would look like, or what it does look like. The poems are placed to the left side, and then the photographs are placed to the right, so that when you read the poetry, you can really get the experience of also seeing and interpreting the photographs in tandem with that. And so the first part of the project for me was really the photography. And so what that really consisted of was getting materials, taking the photos, and getting all of the pictures together, sorting them out, editing them, and trying to compile them into each of the series that was somewhat cohesive with one another. And so throughout the year, I spent a lot of time taking the photos. I took over 1,000 photos, and I had to sort through those and narrow it down to only 35. I don't remember how many shoots I set up, but I was consistently taking photos throughout the year and really trying to get the materials I needed in order to fully show my voice and also have a choice about what I wanted to say within the book. And so that included scheduling, so getting time during focus studies or after school to get people to model for me to get the setting and lighting correct. And so you'll notice throughout my book, the series focuses on hands. And the reason for that was I wanted to focus the photos on a particular subject to make the entire book more cohesive. If I had chosen just to do random pictures and different people or settings, it really wouldn't have made as much sense as if I had done what I had done in choosing one specific subject to focus on. So that gave direction for the photos. And anyway, the next part was sorting through that over 1,000 photos. And this is just a picture of the thumbnails that I really took, just a small shot of the thumbnails that I sort of had to look through and figure out what shapes and made sense and how I wanted to edit them. And so what I did was I would really just pick through the photos. I would pick out 10 or 12 that I liked, and then I would play around with Photoshop and edit them in order to see how I wanted to do that. And I played with the saturation, the color, the contrast, and then also seeing if I could put different color filters on them in order to make them more my own and to see if I could change what I was trying to say with that series. So that's really what I did in order to get the photos together, and that was a big part of the process, is narrowing down and compiling and editing those photos. And so the next part of the book is the poetry portion. I wrote all of the 12 poems, and I tried to use each of the series of photos that the poem is paired with in order to help the poetry have direction and filter the viewer's thought about the photography. So what writing the poetry consisted of was the writing, looking at the photographs, trying to find inspiration, editing it, and printing it. And so this part was a struggle for me, honestly, but I'll talk about that later in the issue section. And then the final product that I ended up with was an 11 by 14 book with 11 by 14 sheets of paper, and the photos are all mounted in the book, and the poetry's printed. So there's a hard copy up in MJ's office, but that's my final product out of all of that work throughout the year. And so talking about issues with my project, one of them was cost of printing. So if you've ever done art photography or anything like that, printing's not exactly cheap. And so I had to find a way to make giving a hard copy final product, being able to produce that. So what I ended up doing was, instead of printing 11 by 14 like poster size things with the 3 photos in the series on them, I had to print like 4 by 6 photos, which were like 30 cents a print, and then mount them. I still think I ended up with a nice presentation, especially with that limitation for me. Another thing was time and learning how to space my time out. I usually work in really short spurts of time, and with that, what happens is I had to meet my deadlines, and I did meet all of my deadlines, but I had to consistently work toward these goals rather than like putting it off or doing anything like that. So I really did learn how to stick with the deadlines and the goals of the project, and I did complete it. So that is something that I'm proud of. And so the final thing I had a problem with was inspiration for the poetry. This year during school, I was really more in the photography frame of mind. In portfolio class, I was really taking more photos, and in general, I was exploring photography more than I was poetry. Last year, I did a lot more poetry than I did photography. So I had to turn that area of my mind back on with writing and figuring out how to put my words together in a cohesive way. So that was a challenge that I had to meet when writing the poems and doing all of that. So Honestly, I can tell you about the process and I can tell you about everything that went into it, but I really think that I need to let the work speak for itself, because that was my intention with the book, is to have the audience interpret it in whatever way they see fit. So for the next half of the presentation, I would like this to be a performance of the poetry with the photography. So. When I was little and did not want to sleep, my grandmother told me, "Close your eyes and pretend to sleep." I closed my eyes, moving my pupils around behind my eyelids, feeling the sensations that little movement created. A pull on the lid, little feet kicking under sheets, trying to get comfortable. The darkness amplified everything else, like an overwhelmingly awake world going on around without me. I was an observer, not meant to participate, but simply exist within the nighttime world. I heard the crickets chirping, bed sheets rustling, the pitter-patter of kitty feet on the roof, my sister snores, the house settling on its foundation. For once, I was able to find silence inside my head. I found focus when I broke down the sounds and existed until I fell asleep. Between the cattails and cockle shells is where I'm at home. In my domain, nothing can touch me. My plant subjects bow with the wind to honor their ruler, a gentle touch, deciding which ones to include for tonight's crown, for a queen cannot rule without a crown. What better way to honor my kingdom than with a crown of flowers, delicate but significant for this world? The chosen are honored and placed upon my head until their little plant bodies die and decay. They are naive to these intentions, and I pluck them one by one at my discretion. This is how my garden kingdom is run. I cultivate and then pluck the best. Maybe I don't need the real world because I have created my own reality. Anxiety attacks are caused by fear. Fear is that feeling of losing the ability to fully see a situation. Our thoughts are so powerful, they can cause our bodies to involuntarily attack itself in order to attempt to regain our own sanity. To control our minds, to stop our own power from overwhelming us, we have to have coping mechanisms. These tools become habit after too long. A habit, something done subconsciously without cognitively making a decision about the action. Biting nails, cracking knuckles, pulling hair. We lose everything once we no longer have the ability to choose. That is when our body and mind work together independently. Our free will is lost, and so are we. People like going to new places because of how stuck they feel where they are. Routine can be suffocating, not because of the routine, because of the expectations. The inability to grow and be who one wants to be. That is the beauty and darkness in relationships. Expectations. And that same is true about living anywhere. It's not the people's expectations that restrict us, it's the need to conform to those expectations that slowly kills us. Moving on allows possibilities because you are given the freedom to choose. Sometimes it's nice to shed the skin of an old life and choose to become someone new. Let me tell you something. Control is that little demon we look for in the back of our minds. It has no form and can change to fit the situation. Fits you like a well-made dress that you slip into without even noticing. Like a bad smoking habit you no longer notice when you indulge in it. but it is impossible to ignore if you don't. Not a physical thing one can personify simply because it manifests itself in every person. We've just chosen to ignore it. And for that reason, the monster has festered and been bubbling up in all of its ugly ways. It's driven by fears, by mentalities, by habits, by situations, painful experiences we just want to shove in an old shoebox and cover up and forget. Little do we understand, memories are not photographs one can hide and forget about. They're the building blocks of our person, and sometimes we do not want to build ourselves with bad memories, for fear our wall will collapse. The one that causes anxiety can't breathe. What's going on? Why can't I make it stop? Why can't I get a grip? Why is the world spinning and pulsating to the beat of my blood rushing to my brain? So stuck in your own mind that you no longer dictate what's going on. Disassociation. None of this concerns me. What I want doesn't matter anyway. Why should I care if I don't influence anything? The only way we know how to associate ourselves with our lives is to have total command over them. How we look, how we act, how we talk. Our carefully constructed mask we build for the world and for ourselves in order to stay sane. Or the other end of the spectrum, rage. Let me just get a grip. My chest is collapsing in on itself. I don't feel anything but my rib cage fighting to contain my lungs that are burning to scream all these thoughts and discombobulated feelings too much. This has been a buildup of frustration, and it's turned into this ugly rage because I can't do anything about the situation. I need something to look how I feel. I need people to feel how I feel so I feel less alone. Things smashing into the walls. That lamp with the pink shade knocked to the ground. Clothes and shoes scattered like my perfectly constructed roll, and it feels good to take back the situation and put the current physical state into something I can understand. After all is said and done, you come down from that power trip and sit in the middle of broken things and wrinkled clothes and cry because you didn't make one damn bit of difference. Life keeps going. You don't suddenly get transported into a world where only good things happen and you are able to understand. No. Entropy exists, and you thought it was your enemy. You fought against it, the chaos you could not control, but you became it. Chaos can only be bottled for so long. Is insanity the antithesis or the epitome of control? So, this was a small excerpt from my book, and I can now take your questions.
So what do you think was the hardest part about choosing photos out of the 1,000 plus that you had?
Putting them together in a series in order for it to make sense and control what I was trying to say with the narrative of the photos. Because whenever you put photos together, you really want to do it intentionally rather than just throwing a bunch together. So I really had to be aware and sorting through and looking at all the possibilities about what I wanted to do and what I wanted to say. So, yeah. Hello?
How exactly is your thesis related to your project? Because your thesis had a lot to do with Turkey and stuff, and your project is with poetry and pictures.
Yeah. So it was honestly about the concept I explored within both. So I stated in my foreword that the thesis was really about exploring an example of control and suppression. And so a coup is really a prime example of control and suppression because one group is trying to overpower another. So instead of exploring that example of like a coup in Turkey, I decided to explore the concept itself, but abstractly. So it sort of helped me to balance my right and my left brain in order to explore research and doing all this stuff about a current event, and then also doing art. So, Paul?
Under what environmental and emotional conditions do you find that poetry comes to you?
I don't know.
Sorry, what was the question?
Under what environmental and emotional conditions does poetry come to me? I don't know. I think it's when I start thinking abstractly and trying to voice like abstract thoughts and write that down. That's when I'm able to write anything. So it's just sort of focusing that energy toward that. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. I have time for one more question. Matthias?
Were any of your photos or poems specifically referencing the situation in Turkey? Like, did you think about doing a photo series that represented that, and then a poem reflecting maybe something not indirectly as the rest of your photos do, but even just straight up?
Straight up, can you give me an example of that?
Like doing, maybe a photo shoot of some sort of destruction or whatever, and then making a poem about some situation in Turkey. Was that ever a thought of yours, or did you really want to keep it more conceptual and not direct?
I did want to keep it conceptual, but in the beginning process of like brainstorming and stuff, I did consider trying to do more of the landscape stuff and taking photos of actual destruction and looking at that rather than exploring it abstractly. But honestly, that's not my personal style of photography. I like abstract photography, and I also wanted to figure out how I could do something that maybe wasn't as directly correlated to make people think more. So that's sort of the reason why I chose that. So, thank you.